Is my favorite character hated by his author? I picked up Inkheart for a school assignment when I was about 15, and for the majority of the book I fucking despised Basta. But now he's my all-time favorite character. But I don't think the author shares my love for this garbage piece of man. And I want to talk about why that is. Hello, I'm Amelia. I'm an indie author whose favorite books are actually in this series. To show what I mean, I'll talk about two different characters that are both amazing, Dustfinger and Basta. I do love them both, but they are treated very differently by the author. Before you watch any further, this video will contain spoilers for the series, especially for the second and third book. So if you haven't read them and you don't want them spoiled for you, feel free to jump off this video now. Now, if you're still here, I will talk about one specific thing that for me indicates how the author sees these characters, and that's how their deaths are handled. Let's start with Dustfinger, the true main character of Inkheart, the book inside the book, and to be honest, the whole series. He's a fire eater who was read out into our world, and as a teenager, I too fell in love with him. He's kind of nice, but also a coward who doesn't pick sides based on morals, but instead picks sides based on who promises to get him home. And even when he kind of knows the probability of the promise being true is very, very low, he still chooses to be like, yeah, you will get me home. I don't care if you're literally my enemy, but if you get me home, I will do whatever you tell me to do. This man is morally grey in the softest way I've ever read. He's clearly made out to be kind and likable, even when he does really questionable things, and to be honest, he can be kind of an ass sometimes. I do actually like that he's human. He's not perfect, which is something Cornelia Funke does really well with her characters overall, actually. And despite being a coward, and like a self-proclaimed one at that, he does care deeply about the people he cares about. At first, he was even my favorite character of all time when I read it, and my favorite character in the book. And I was pissed when he died. It's probably the only time I really considered throwing a book against the wall. And the only reason I didn't do it was because it was a library book. And by then I had already suffered the heartbreak of Basta's death, so. But what makes Dustfinger's death stand out from Basta's, for example, is how much of a deal it was, like how big of a deal it was. He died saving this brat of a boy he kind of had adopted, and his death affected pretty much every other character in the book in some way. And like, the main point of the third book is just to get him back from the dead, so. Like, my man has plot armor deluxe, but it is implemented in a way that makes you buy it. And while Resurrections has a tendency to be kind of cheap, Funke really pulled it off with Dustfinger. Like, there's consequences and they had to work really hard to make it possible, and it works with the world. Now, another thing I really love with how Dustfinger is written is that for the duration of the first book, we don't really know what he wants to go home to. Like we only know that he will do anything in his powers to get back home. Now, there is mentions of a girl, but not in the sense of, oh, he wants to go back to her, but instead in the sense of, this is how he got the scars that covers his face. Speaking of Dustfinger's scars, the man who made them will be our next example. While the Fire Eater isn't the main character in the series, in fact Maggie is, he is the one who steals the show on the protagonist side. Likewise, Basta is never the main villain of any of the books, but I would like to argue that he's the one who gets the best treatment from the author, for the most part. Unless you count Orpheus because of the last book. At first, Basta is just the right-hand man to the main villain in the first book. He's basically a loyal guard dog with anger issues, lack of respect, and a knife kink. Like I said, I hated him at first, but then we got to know more about him. Like, he's the most superstitious fool ever, and his breath smells nice, which in and of itself, with those reasons, are, like, admirable. And he also keeps his shirt clean. He wears a Snow White shirt in his line of work. And I think that's very impressive. And also, like I mentioned, he's very loyal to his master, even when his master practically disregards him and leaves him to die. And, like, that event was huge for how I saw him. Like, when he got locked up, and what do you mean? I actually started to, like, feel sorry for this guy I had groaned over for, like, 400 pages. Now he's the reason I reread these books. And then the author kills him in the most basic and boring way possible. Like, he's stabbed. And it's like an afterthought. No one really pays attention to it until afterwards. It's like this big fight and it's, oops, Basta got stabbed in the meantime. And, like, I see the irony of the knife-wielding Chihuahua getting stabbed. But, like, the lack of acknowledgement that he died. Yeah. And the first time I really thought, like, oh, he gets stabbed and then he will just recover. But no, he just died. Oops, Mortimer stabbed him. Now, I did say that Basta gets better treatment than the other antagonists, and that's because his memory lives on. He is mentioned even after his death, and the impact he has on the other characters, or some of the other characters at least, is still there even after he's dead. He also kind of returns as this creature of darkness called a nightmare, which makes him the only antagonist to be, like, resurrected from the dead in that way. When they actually get rid of him in that form, it does have a bit more impact, even though that also is just a few lines, but there is some weight to it. And this is more than many other antagonists get in the series. Capricorn and most of his men gets taken by the Shadow, who then goes up in smoke. Firefox is killed by trying out the book that makes people immortal. The Adderhead is killed by writing 3 words in said book. And the Piper, it kind of shares Basta's fate, just getting stabbed. And if we want to talk about the 4th book, the Shadow Reader gets 1 paragraph where she is turned into plants. Now, there are several other people who dies in these books, and how it's handled is greatly affected on whether they are on the protagonist side or the antagonistic side. If this is a choice or just the author's bias showing through, I don't know. My theory is a little bit of both, and it's probably the one thing that bothers me the most with these books. Otherwise, this is my all-time favorite book series, but it does feel like the respect given to her villains is disregarded when they're about to die. Because Cornelia Funke does treat the creation of her characters with a lot of respect. Like, her villains are just as human as the heroes. But I can also see it being a choice, since these books were made for 9 to 12-year-old kids, and I get you may not want to traumatize them too much. Though I do feel like Dustfinger's death would do that to anyone anyway. And I know I was a teenager at the time, but having 3 of my most liked characters in the series die in the same book still pisses me off even more than the movie adaptation does. As much as I hate that their deaths are treated as a convenient way to get rid of them, it also goes to show that even if you don't want your characters to be liked, you should respect them enough to flesh them out. And like, yes, there are villains in this series who are basically evil for the sake of being evil, but even then they're given backstories, relationships, motivations, humanity. It's just that their deaths are frustratingly underwhelming. Now, I will need to calm down, because just thinking about Basta's death still hurts my soul, and I'm not about to go into a rant about that. But if you're interested in how Basta especially inspired some of the characters in my own book, I made a video about it that you can watch over here. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, have a great adventure, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!